This is Sarah, and today we are joined here by the one and only Noah Ricci. And today we are going to be talking about the graphic novel that he is currently working on and hoping to get published in about 10 years or so. So Noah, why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about your novel?
Okay, so it's a visual novel, a graphical piece, currently titled Birchwing Bastard. Basic premise is it's sort of a self-discovery story about adapting to one's environment and figuring things out in this weird and kooky thing we call life. It's up to our main character to figure out how to get all of this stuff to just stop and how to return things to normal, but along the way also learn a few life lessons and survival lessons.
Ooh, that's very interesting. I've never heard of a novel per se that's taken that approach, so that's definitely going to be really unique. So tell me a little bit more about the main character. Like, you've dropped a few hints here or there, and I don't want to give away any spoilers, but can you tell me a bit more about him or her?
It's not a human. I was always interested in telling a story that didn't center around something we could necessarily relate to, not necessarily something that was human or even mammalian. So my main character is reptilian and really animalistic. And his actual species is he's a type of European dragon that sort of takes inspiration from a wide variety of other dragons from different cultures, different environments and stuff. Sort of my personal ideal dragon, if that makes sense.
That is so cool. I love dragons. So when you say that it's a dragon, are we talking like the Game of Thrones dragon, or are we talking more about like the sort of dragons you see in children's TV shows like Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon?
Well,
that's the important question that I need answered here.
I'd say it's closer to Game of Thrones' dragon just because it is a little bit more animalistic, but it does have a lot of charisma and a lot of personality to it, sort of like the How to Train Your Dragon dragons.
Very interesting. Okay, so when you say that dragons can gallop on all four limbs, are you saying they're kind of like horses? I'm not quite sure how like dragons are represented historically.
Well, historically they're more like lizards with wings or snakes with legs and wings, which is, and like that's pretty much the only two criteria if you are in the West. But I always like the idea that they're sort of a mix between hawks, cats, and, well, dinosaurs, because they're probably the most alien things that I can think of off the top of my head that like superficially resemble a dragon.
Okay, fair enough. That definitely helps paint a clearer image in my head, because when you said gallop, like my brain automatically just conjured up this horse dragon and I got really confused. So thank you for that. So I have another question for you. How far are you in your script?
Roughly, I am done with the first chapter, with the rough draft.
Okay.
I haven't gotten many illustrations done. I've mostly done conceptual pieces to get the basic vibes of the various characters, locations, set pieces, and themes.
Interesting. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a lot of work, because it's one thing to actually write a novel and it's another thing to also be the illustrator for it. So it definitely sounds like quite the workload, but that's great that you're being able to be creative in two different aspects. You know, that's really, really cool.
I agree. That's why I wanted to do it. So.
Right, exactly. So when do you hope to get it published?
Not for a while, because I'm going for this sort of art style that's sort of a mix between realistic and stylistic, and that's really difficult to do, especially when, you know, you're in college and you're trying to get your master's, maybe your doctorate. That's going to take a considerable amount of time just to get to the illustration phase. So I would say like probably not until like 10 years in the future, probably, is a rough estimate. But that's sort of like the goal I want to hit, is I want to get like something out in the public 10 years, at least 10 before 10 years are up, so that people can actually see it and I'm like still alive and able to make more stuff.
Exactly, of course. I mean, I think 10 years is a pretty realistic goal. I know a lot of authors, for example, like John Green, who try to churn out a novel in about a year. And that just sounds kind of stressful, you know, and it sounds like you're kind of compromising some of the really more creative aspects. So that's great that you're giving yourself time to work on it and enjoy working on it.
Yeah,
you know?
And not to toot my own horn a little bit too much, but even like graphic novelists like Art Spiegelman, who worked on Mouse and a bunch of other really great works. If you haven't heard of Art Spiegelman, he's amazing. That took him about, I think it took him a total of 15 years to publish both parts of Mouse, not just like the first part. But either way, it was at least a decade long for him to publish that.
Right. Oh my goodness, that's crazy. And so how are you going to go about getting your novel published? Are you going to try to go the more independent indie route where you try to sort of market yourself and try to attract attention to your book? Or are you going to kind of hire a more official publishing agent?
Yes. The thing is that preferably I would love to publish my own work. That's just the ideal market for artists and stuff. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, that's not really how it works all the time.
Okay.
The hope is that I can get a lot done. Well, at least the goal of 10 years, the 10-year project done and published like on my own website, maybe on my own blog or something like that, and people will see it. It'll gain traction that way. I don't know how that'll work, but that's the ideal. People get to see it for free. They get interested. And then maybe if it gains traction, I'll maybe do a part 2, part 3 or something like that and put it behind a paywall. Maybe publish it on an official website of mine. But I don't know how peers or publishers would come into play with that. And it would probably be a huge gamble to market your work to another publisher.
Right, exactly. And typically when you go the more official route, it is very expensive to sort of hire a publishing agent because they do take a pretty decent amount of the earnings. And I have found that nowadays it is a lot easier to be sort of an independent publisher because there are so many ways to market nowadays, that basically anything is possible. So I think no matter what you do, you're definitely going to be on the right track. All right. Well, what inspired you to do all this? What inspired your love for animals, your interest in mythological creatures, and your desire to write a graphic novel?
Probably just the culture I was raised on. Because my mom was was a lot into animals and a lot into monster movies, and she made her own Godzilla plate once she heard the Blue Oyster Cult song Godzilla, and that I now have that's actually in my dorm, and I love it and I cherish it because it's a part of our family history almost.
Yeah.
And I grew up on so many different monster movies, all the classic Japanese tokusatsu movies, Godzilla, Gamera, all that good stuff. Spielberg monster movies, Jaws, Jurassic Park, and documentaries about animals, and even fake documentaries and fake journals that were made to illustrate fictional creatures or extinct creatures in a realistic light, like Dragonology, Dracopedia, if anyone even knows what that. For the 3 people who know what that actually is, if you actually know what that is, I appreciate you, and you should join the bandwagon. It's pretty fun. But yeah, it was sort of being raised on all that sort of stuff that really got me into animals and fictional creatures. And that's also kind of the same spark that inspired me to become a zoologist and biologist.
Very nice. That's so interesting. All right. Well, I guess my final question for you. Now, it's a doozy, and it's the most important one I have during this whole podcast.
Okay, I'm ready.
I need you to make your best dragon noise that represents your character.
Dragon noise.
Well.
Open brackets, close brackets, dragon noise. That's even how it's written in the comic. Just open bracket, dragon noise, close bracket in the comic.
Wow, so that's literally what the dragon
I'm lazy.
sounds like.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, at least you're being accurate with it. Well, I guess that concludes our podcast for today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Noah Riccio. And for all of you that are listening right now, you should definitely check out Noah Riccio's book that comes out in about 10 years or so. It should be on the market. Alrighty. Well, y'all take care of yourselves.
Toodles.
Toodles.